My name is Lauren Whitaker, and I'm 28 years old. I write code for a living. Clean, deterministic strings of logic that behave the way they're told, which is maybe why I've always kept my apartment the same way. Clean, deterministic, and mine. I drag my suitcase down the hallway just after 9 p.m., the wheels muttering over familiar scuffs, the kind you only notice when you live somewhere long enough to memorize every sound. I was jet-lagged and sticky with airport air. The lock clicked, the door swung, and for one weightless second, I thought I'd entered the wrong unit. My sofa had migrated to a weird diagonal. A plastic dinosaur bared its teeth at my ankle. The scent in the air was no longer eucalyptus and lemon. It was ketchup and crayons. A child's shoe sat on top of my fern like a crown. "Hey, you're back," a voice called casually from the hallway bathroom. Alyssa stepped out, towel on her head like this was a spa and not my home. "Mom said you'd get in tonight." There are moments you will replay later with perfect clarity. The damp towel twisting, the tiny handprints on my coffee table, the open refrigerator door, humming like a held breath. It took me a beat to find my voice. "Alyssa, what is going on?" She smiled, a little guilty, a lot hopeful. "It's just for a bit. My landlord's a psycho and the kids needed somewhere." She gestured, and like a summoning, 3 small bodies clattered into the living room. "Auntie Lauren." My title became a net that wrapped around my ankles, held me still while they told me about their new rooms and the secret fort built behind my curtains. "My rooms?" I echoed. My spare bedroom door stood wide open. Children's clothes tumbled out like some cheerful landslide. In my own bedroom, my sheets, new, expensive, chosen because they are the one guaranteed trick to turn my brain off after a 12-hour sprint, were already wrinkled and printed with something red and sticky. Alyssa followed my gaze. "That'll wash out," she said breezily. "Don't be materialistic." There are phrases that sound like nothing and feel like a slap. I let the words hang. I put my suitcase down. I picked it back up. I set it down again. "How," I asked carefully, "did you get inside?" Her eyes slid away, and in that motion I already knew. "Mom and Dad had a key," she said. "Emergency spare, remember? It was an emergency." My phone buzzed. Evan's name lit the screen. He was on a work trip of his own. Wrong time zone, right person. I stepped into the kitchen, already reprogrammed. Supportive girlfriend mode, not crying daughter mode, outraged tenant mode. "Hey," I answered, aiming for calm. "Minor hurricane." He listened while I cataloged the strange new map of my kitchen. 2 gallons of milk I didn't buy. A brand of cereal that leaves sticky trails. Tupperware like nesting dolls on every shelf. He was quiet the way he is when he's gathering facts. The quiet that makes me feel less alone. "I'm with you," he said finally. "Do you want me to come over this weekend?" "I might need a demolition crew," I said. He laughed softly. We didn't name the thing that hung between us. The fact that while he was reassuring me, his ex, Marissa, had texted him twice that morning about a jacket she accidentally left at his place months ago. Old patterns, new boundaries. Not tonight, I told myself. One fire at a time. Alyssa appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "You're not seriously mad?" "I'm surprised," I said. Then, because the truth was a drumbeat in my ribcage, "And yes, I'm mad. This is my apartment." She launched into her story. Late rent, a landlord who had it out for her. Mixed messages about deadlines, how she had the kids that week and no one else was stepping up. Every sentence had the same engine. I had no choice. When she said, "Mom said you wouldn't mind," something inside me tipped. "Mom and Dad gave you my key," I said, without asking me. "They knew you'd make the big deal out of it." She half laughed. "Anyway, it's already done. We'll be here for like a week, maybe 2. A dinosaur toppled off the coffee table and clacked on the floor, a gavel in a toy courtroom. My parents answered the phone on the second ring, tag-teaming their disappointment like a duet they'd rehearsed all my life. "Oh, Lauren, thank God Alyssa found somewhere," my mother exhaled. "Found somewhere?" I said slowly. "She used my key, that you gave her." My father's turn. Family helps family. "I work from home," I said. "I pay for this space so I can do that. My lease forbids long-term guests without notice to management." "Don't be dramatic," Mom said. "She's already settled. You can't just kick her out." "Actually," I said, and heard the tremor under my voice, "I can ask for my own home back." The call ended the way it always ends, with me feeling like a stranger in my own story. Alyssa was in the kitchen now. putting my dishes away in the wrong cabinets. The children had found my PlayStation controllers and were arguing about the blue one. I inhaled through my nose like my therapist taught me. I exhaled the same way. Okay, I said to Alyssa, here are my boundaries. 1 week, 7 days. While you're here, no uninvited guests. The kids don't sleep in my bed. You clean up after them. And tomorrow, I'm changing the locks. You'll keep the new key while you're here. Mom and Dad won't. She blinked, then smirked, like I'd told a joke she didn't find funny. Fine, she said finally, in the tone that means not fine at all. I opened my desk drawer on muscle memory and saw the small black lockbox tucked in the back, the one I use for emergency cash and a copy of my passport. I didn't open it. Not then. Instead, I reached up and set my fingers against a clear case on the shelf. Inside, the signed baseball my late Uncle Ray gave me when I was 10, the signature smudged by a thumbprint I'd never wipe away. A silly thing, a sentimental thing, but also a promise to the child who became me. One thing that is yours alone. In the living room, a child yawned dramatically and collapsed into my spot on the couch. Another climbed into my lap without asking, as if I were an armchair. Their trust was a warm, heavy thing. It muddled the edges of my anger, the way rain quiets a siren without stopping the emergency. Alyssa watched me with that look that says, go ahead, refuse them. Be the bad guy. I didn't refuse them. I tucked hair behind a small ear and said, it's bedtime. I walked them to the spare bedroom, mine, technically, now strewn with tiny t-shirts and a stuffed giraffe. I turned off the lamp and stood there while their breathing deepened and evened out, and for a moment the apartment felt like a home that belonged to all of us, and not to me at all. Back in the hallway, Alyssa was on her phone, texting fast, thumbs flying. I told them we're good, she said without looking up. Who's them? I asked. Mom, Dad, a couple friends, everyone's relieved. I didn't say we're good, I said. She lifted her face, finally seeing me as something other than an obstacle. You wouldn't put your own sister and her kids on the street. I wouldn't, I said. I also won't be erased in my own life. I changed the locks the next morning. The locksmith was kind. He'd seen worse, he said, which wasn't the reassurance he thought it was. When the new deadbolt clicked, something unclenched in my chest. I gave Alyssa her copy. I did not call my parents with the new code. That night, the apartment looked more chaotic somehow, as if the walls had absorbed our argument and decided to echo it back. Toys colonized the hallway. A wet towel slumped over my office chair like a defeated ghost. I opened the fridge to find my favorite beer missing and a crayon drawing taped to the door, the four of us as stick figures, smiling in front of a lopsided rectangle with a triangle on top. Our house, it said, the R backwards. I stared at the drawing a long time. Then I took a picture of the refrigerator door, the towel on my chair, the stains on my sheets, the dinosaur under the fern, as if proof would make reality behave. My phone buzzed again. Evan, how are you holding up? 1 week, I typed. 7 days. I set the boundary. Proud of you, he wrote. Document everything. I've got you. I put the phone down. I opened the desk drawer again, looked at the lockbox, and shut the drawer without touching it. The baseball case gleamed a little in the lamplight. I checked that its latch was tight. In the morning, my parents' silence arrived like weather. No calls, just the pressure system of their disapproval spreading across my day. Alyssa announced, in front of the kids, that Auntie Lauren is making us leave in a week, and the youngest face crumpled like tissue paper. I took the hit and made pancakes. That night, while Alyssa scrolled on her phone, I told her again, 7 days. She looked at me the same way she had when we were kids, and I refused to trade my Halloween candy for her broken bracelet, as if fairness were an insult I kept insisting on. Maybe it is. Maybe fairness, in my family, has always been a troublemaker. But in 7 days, I thought, standing in my own doorway as if it were a borrowed threshold, I will lock this door and choose who holds the key. On day 2, I started counting. I didn't mean to. I woke up to the clatter of cereal bowls and the comedy of someone trying to find my spatula in the baking drawer, and a part of me thought, just shower, go to your desk, pretend this is a storm that will pass if you hold still. But when I stepped on a controller in the hallway and it didn't hurt, I realized it wasn't mine. Mine has a small chip on the left trigger from a midnight boss fight and a stupid victory dance that spun out of control. This one was pristine. I went to the TV stand. No console. I crouched, as if a PlayStation could tuck itself into a shadow to avoid eye contact. Cables dangled like veins cut loose from a heart. "Alyssa," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Where's my PlayStation?" She didn't look up from her phone. "Oh, I lent it to Connor." "Who is Connor?" She blinked at me with the patience of a teacher confronted by a very slow student. "My boyfriend." "You lent my console to your boyfriend," I repeated, because repetition is how a program handles errors. Pass the input through again. See if the output changes. She shrugged. "He was over last night while you were sleeping. He and the kids wanted to play something newer. He'll bring it back." "I didn't invite him over, and you don't get to loan out my things." "You're being controlling," she said lightly, as if she were reading my horoscope. "We're family." I stood there with the strangled impulse to laugh. Somewhere down the hallway, a child sang the ABCs wrong on purpose, on a loop, a siren rewritten as a prank. Inventory became an act of self-defense. I took photos, the nicked edge of the coffee table, the neon marker drawings on my bedroom wall, constellations that spelled out a stranger's sky, the mysterious gouge near the hallway baseboard. The signed baseball case on my shelf was ajar. I reached up, lifted the clear lid. Empty. For a moment, nothing inside me moved. I could hear the fridge hum, the thud of a small body racing from room to room, my own breath stalling. "Alyssa," I managed, "where is Uncle Ray's ball?" She frowned. "One of the boys took it outside. It's somewhere. Relax, Laura, they're kids." "It was signed," I said. "It was the one thing—" "They didn't know," she said, and there was a hard edge under the softness. Translation. Not my fault. I went to my desk because I had to be wrong about at least one thing today. The lockbox slept in its usual corner, matte, black, and quiet. I spun the combination, lifted the lid. Inside, the copy of my passport, the spare health insurance card, the tiny velvet pouch that once held a silver ring I bought myself the year I learned how to say no. No cash, no emergency fund, no envelope of crisp bills that meant even if all else failed, you could buy a bus ticket to a better idea. I closed the lid. I opened it again, as if I might have misread an empty rectangle. "Alyssa, there's a way your voice sounds when you are visiting the scene of a crime and attempting to be courteous about it. Did you take the cash from my lockbox?" Her face went still. Then she went on the offensive so fast it was almost graceful. "Borrowed," she said. "I borrowed it. I had to cover something. I'll pay you back." "When?" I asked. "As soon as I can." That isn't an answer. "Well, I don't have it right now, do I?" She gestured around at the evidence of her scarcity, which included a half-empty six-pack of my favorite beer. "You make good money. You don't even need that cash." There it was, the myth I had been cast in since childhood. The responsible one has infinite reserves. I wrote the amount on a legal pad, my handwriting too neat for how my chest felt. Under it, I listed the console, 3 games, the missing baseball, the broken headphones I spotted on the office chair with one ear cup dangling like a dislocated shoulder. My parents answered quickly when I called, because disappointment likes to be punctual. "Don't nickel and dime your sister," my mother sighed after I read the list. "It's over $2,000, I said, not counting the repairs. "It's things," my father said. "Things can be replaced." "Are you offering to replace them?" I asked, sweet as glass. Silence, then a pivot. "We're worried about the children. They can feel your hostility." I looked at the marker drawing on my wall. "I'm worried about my lease. It explicitly forbids long-term guests without management approval. I work here. I need quiet." "Then go work at a cafe," Mom said, as if she had discovered a hack I'd never considered. "Lauren, darling, you can't make this all about rules." I hung up before my voice could fray. Evan texted, "Want me to come by tonight?" And it was like someone opened a window. Air moved. "Please," I wrote, and bring a calm face. He arrived with takeout and a look he uses when he's about to rebuild a rotten porch board by board. We ate in my office with the door closed while the soundtrack of Alyssa's life thumped gently through the wall. I showed him the photos. He listened without interrupting. "Document it all," he said finally. "Timestamp the images. Back them up to the cloud. Email the list to yourself so there's a record. This isn't about being vindictive. It's about being clear." "Clarity makes me feel like the villain," I said. He reached for my hand. "Only to people who benefit from your confusion." A knock at the office door cut the quiet. It opened before I answered. A man I'd met twice leaned into my doorway with the confidence of a parrot who learned to mimic the word permission. Connor, tall, handsome in a lazy way, holding 2 of my beers. "We're putting on a movie," he announced, as if delivering a weather report. "You good with the volume?" Evan stood, slow, polite. "This is Lauren's workspace, babe," he said. "She's on a call." Connor smirked. "Looks like dinner to me." "Please leave," I said. He shrugged, raised the beers like a toast to our shared absurdity, and did not leave until Alyssa materialized behind him with performative exasperation. "You can't dictate who I see," she hissed at me when he was out of earshot. "You don't control me." "I control who is in my home," I said, and the word home felt like a bruise I kept pressing to check the pain. By morning, the pressure had migrated to my wider bloodline. An aunt called to remind me that family comes first. Another texted a Bible verse about generosity, which felt weaponized in its cleanliness. My grandmother, sweet and sharp, left a voicemail. "Dear heart, do not let them call selfish what is simply self-regard." I listened twice and saved it. At noon, I took a picture of the kitchen sink stacked high with dishes like a geological timeline. At 1, I photographed the new chip in the hallway paint. At 2, a neighbor texted me. "Everything okay? Lots of noise lately." I apologized. I realized I was apologizing to a person I'd never met for a chaos I didn't choose. At 4, I called my landlord. I told him the truth. He was kinder than I expected. "Unauthorized occupants are a liability," he said. "I'll note it. If she's established residency, we need to follow process, even if she's not on the lease. Start with a formal notice." Process is a language I speak fluently. I Googled, I called a friend of Evan's who does tenant law. I filled out the template. The printer whirred like a small animal. The words looked clinical, which soothed me. 30 days notice to vacate, unauthorized occupancy, violation of lease terms. I made 2 copies. I sent 1 certified mail to my own address, because that's what the internet told me to do when your sister refuses her own mail. I handed the other to Alyssa in the kitchen, where a pot of mac and cheese bubbled with cheerful indifference. She glanced at the paper and laughed. "Good luck with that, Lauren. I'm not going anywhere." The youngest, Cameron, with the cowlick that never obeys, looked up at me with blue trust and asked, "Are we staying here forever?" And in the silence after Alyssa's laughter, I heard my own heart say no. Not forever. Not even 30 days, if the law could help it. I texted my parents a photo of the notice with a short message. "I've started the legal process. I'm still willing to help Alyssa find another place and loan a deposit, but this is my home. Please don't contact me to pressure me out of this decision." My father called immediately. I let it ring. When it stopped, he texted, "You're destroying this family." I looked around at the toy cities, the damp towels, the crayon-scarred wall. I looked at the open space on my shelf, where a sign in baseball used to be. I looked at the lockbox, now just a black box, promise emptied. I thought, if this is what our family requires to remain intact, if the price of together is my consent carved out of me, then maybe what's breaking isn't the family. Maybe it's the spell. That night, I slept on my own couch because my bedroom smelled like fruit punch and accusation. Around midnight, I woke to the low flicker of the TV and voices I didn't recognize. I padded to the hall. 2 new adults moved like they owned the air. Friends of Connor's, maybe, or Alyssa's, or no one's. Alyssa looked at me with eyes that dared me to object. I opened my phone camera and took a photo, my hand steady. In the morning, I printed it and added it to a folder labeled Evidence. The word was ugly and useful. The folder grew teeth. Evan kissed my forehead at the door before work. "You're not the villain," he said again, and his voice made a corridor through the noise long enough for me to breathe. "You're the author." After he left, I stood in the center of my living room and felt the fault lines under my feet. The week I'd given Alyssa was already collapsing under the weight of this new calendar I hadn't wanted to learn. 30 days sounded like forever, and also like a finish line. I put my hand on the doorframe, the wood warm from hands that weren't mine. 30 days, I said aloud to the empty room inside the noise. And then I'm changing the story. From the hallway, Alyssa laughed again at some joke on her phone. The sound slid across my skin like a dare. I picked up the folder. I started a new list. The next 7 days passed like a fever I couldn't sweat out. The 30-day notice paper hung on my refrigerator, its edges curling from humidity, ignored like wallpaper. Alyssa didn't mention it again. She just lived louder. More laughter, more guests, more noise bleeding through every wall. At night, when I closed my bedroom door, it felt like holding back a tide with a screen door. By the end of week 2, My living room smelled like takeout and spilled juice. There was a dent in the drywall where one of the kids threw a toy car. The couch, my couch, was permanently sticky. I could tell which child had sat where based on the candy stains. Alyssa's boyfriend, Connor, now appeared so frequently I stopped pretending to be surprised. Sometimes he brought friends. Once I came home to find a stranger asleep on my couch, shoes still on. I started locking my office during the day. My laptop was my lifeline, my job, my income, my one controllable thing. But even with the lock, the pounding came. Small fists. "Auntie Lauren, play with us." Alyssa never stopped them. The line between niece, nephew, and hostage blurred. When I stepped outside to catch my breath one afternoon, my landlord was in the hallway. He nodded grimly. "We've received complaints from other tenants," he said. "I know you're trying, but this can't continue. I've started the paperwork on my end." The word paperwork sounded safe. Safe was a lie, but I wanted it anyway. That night, I called my parents again. I thought maybe, just maybe, after seeing the photos and the damages, they'd understand. "Mom," I began, voice brittle. "You know the lockbox money? That wasn't borrowing. That was theft. And now she's bringing strangers into my home. The neighbors have complained." "Lauren," Mom interrupted softly, "you have no idea how hard this is for your sister. She's doing her best." Her best. I looked around at the wreckage, at Connor's jacket on my chair, at dishes stacked like monuments. "Her best is destroying my life," I said quietly. Dad took the phone. "You can't make this all about you. She's your sister. Where is she supposed to go?" "You could take her in," I said before I could stop myself. Dead silence. Then, "We don't have the space." I laughed. It came out sounding dangerous. Neither do I. The call I didn't expect came 2 days later, from Eric, Alyssa's ex-husband. "I'm sorry to bother you," he began awkwardly. I heard the kids are staying with your parents, but I couldn't reach them, and the school called me about a new address. Your address." I sat down. "They've been here for 3 weeks. He exhaled. 3 weeks in your apartment?" "Yes, with Alyssa and her boyfriend, and some of his friends, apparently." The silence that followed was sharp. "That's not okay," he said finally. "The kids need stability. If she's not housing them safely, I can take them. Full-time, until she's back on her feet." For the first time in weeks, I felt something like relief. "Would you really?" "I've been trying," he said quietly, "but she keeps saying everything's fine." When Alyssa found out I'd spoken to him, she didn't yell at first. She stared at me, flat, quiet, like a mirror gone cold. "You called my ex?" she said. "You went behind my back?" "He reached out," I said. "He's worried about the kids, and honestly, Alyssa, I am too." Her voice rose. "You're trying to take them from me. They need a safe space." "They're my children," she screamed. "You have no idea what it's like to do this alone." I wanted to say I did, just in a different way. But the kids had come out, wide-eyed, clinging to her legs. The youngest started to cry. And the truth was, no one in that moment looked like the villain, and no one looked like the hero. Just 2 women in a war neither could afford to win. That night, I packed a duffel bag and left my own apartment. I couldn't sleep there anymore, not with the noise, the tension, the eyes that followed me through the hallway like I was trespassing. My friend Maya, who lived across town, didn't even hesitate when I called. "Come stay," she said. "Don't explain, just bring coffee." So I did. For the first time in weeks, I slept without a door slamming, without tiny feet running across the floor at dawn. From Maya's couch, I called my landlord again. "It's time," I said. "Let's move forward." He told me his lawyer had already drafted the eviction filing. "She's not a tenant," he said, "but she's established residency. We have to go through formal process. It'll take a few weeks, but it's solid." "Do what you need to do," I said. "I'll cooperate fully." When my parents found out, chaos followed. Dad called first, shouting, "You're destroying this family. How could you file eviction papers against your own sister?" Mom called next, crying, "Lauren, please, don't make her a legal case. It'll ruin her record. Just give her time." "Time for what?" I asked. "To ruin my lease? To get me evicted instead?" "Don't talk like that," Mom whispered. "She's desperate." "So was I said. "You just never noticed." The next day, Evan came by with a camera. He photographed the apartment top to bottom, holes in the wall, broken furniture, beer cans, marker on the wall that spelled Connor Rocks. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Later that night, he handed me a flash drive. "Backed up everything. If this goes to court, you're ready." I nodded. "You've been incredible through all this." He smiled faintly. "You've been stronger." For a second, I thought about his ex, Marissa, and how she used to text him when she wanted attention. I saw a flash of her name on his phone last week, a message he didn't open. Part of me wondered if that was what strength looked like, choosing not to respond when someone demanded your guilt. By week 4, the case was filed. Alyssa laughed when she got the official notice. "You really went there, huh?" she said, waving the paper. "You think some court order will make me leave?" I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. She was already on speakerphone with someone, probably Connor, telling him I was crazy enough to evict her own sister. That night, I got a text from Mom. "Your father and I will pay for a hotel for Alyssa and the kids for 2 weeks if you drop the case." I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote back, "No. 2 weeks will just turn into 2 more. I'm done negotiating my peace." Her reply came a minute later. "You've changed." I typed, "I've finally stopped changing for everyone else," and hit send. The next morning, my landlord called again. "Lauren, there's been another complaint." I went up to check, and... He paused. "There were 6 people in your apartment." I closed my eyes. 6? Your sister, her boyfriend, 3 kids, and 2 extra adults, friends of theirs. I told them it's a violation. They said you gave permission. I didn't. "I figured," he said grimly. "My lawyer's expediting the eviction order." For the first time, I felt something dangerous under my ribs. Not just anger, but grief. Not for the things she broke, but for the illusion that my family would ever understand. That night, I got one more call, from Grandma. Her voice trembled, but was steady. "I heard what's happening," she said. "Do not waver, sweetheart. Sometimes love looks like saying no." I swallowed hard. I think I finally believed that. When the call ended, I stared at my folder of photos and documents, proof of everything I'd never wanted to prove. For the first time in my life, I felt free of the idea that being kind meant being small. 30 days. Eviction filed. Damage done. And for once, I wasn't the one apologizing for it. 2 months later, I turned the key, my key, and walked back into silence. No voices, no cartoons humming through the walls, no smell of reheated noodles clinging to the air, just the faint scent of dust and lemon cleaner. The eviction had been finalized a week earlier, and Alyssa had finally left 2 days before the sheriff was scheduled to arrive. My landlord called to confirm, "It's done, Lauren. You can come home." I thought home would feel like victory. It felt like aftermath. The living room was unrecognizable. The couch cushions were shredded, a coffee ring bled into the carpet like a slow bruise, and one of my dining chairs was missing a leg entirely. There were holes in the drywall. 3 of them, perfectly round, like someone had punched through their frustration and left it behind as proof. I stood in the doorway for a long time, not touching anything. It wasn't just damage. It was the echo of every line I'd drawn that had been crossed anyway. The landlord had been sympathetic, maybe even impressed by how carefully I documented everything. "You're organized," he'd said when I sent him the file of photos. Organized, as if neat paperwork could soothe the chaos that had seeped into my life. He agreed to split repair costs if I handled the work quickly, and I did. I hired a cleaning crew, a handyman, a carpet guy. $3,700 later, the apartment looked like itself again, mostly. When I walked through the cleaned rooms that first night, I found myself stopping at the shelf where Uncle Ray's signed baseball had once sat. The case was empty, the dust outline of a circle still faintly visible. I traced it with my fingertip, then set a small photo there instead. A picture of me and my grandma, laughing over coffee. A new placeholder for something lost, but not wasted. The small claims case went through faster than I expected. Evan's lawyer friend helped me prepare everything. Photos, receipts, the bank statement showing the missing $500. Alyssa didn't show up to the hearing. The judge barely needed 10 minutes. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, glancing through the evidence, "you've demonstrated damages totaling $2,150 plus the missing cash. Judgment in your favor. Whether I'll ever see that money is a different story, but hearing the words in your favor felt like a closing chapter, the kind you read twice just to make sure it's real." The family fallout was quieter and crueler than the legal one. Alyssa moved back in with our parents after burning through 2 friends' couches. The kids were now living primarily with their father, Eric, who had filed for custody modification right after the eviction. Emergency basis, he told the court, for stability. He won. Alyssa got weekends, supervised at first. When Mom called, her voice was small. I can't believe it came to this," she said. "You two used to be so close." I didn't remind her that close often meant me cleaning up after Alyssa's mistakes. I just said, it came to this because everyone expected me to fix it. Mom went quiet, then sighed. I'm sorry, she said. Not for giving her the key. I thought I was helping, but for not seeing how much it cost you. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest she'd ever come. Thanks, I said, and I meant it. Dad took longer. When we finally spoke, his disappointment was heavier than anger. You didn't have to make it official, he said. There were other ways. Like what? I asked. Waiting until my landlord evicted me instead? He didn't answer. Just a slow exhale, then, you've changed. I hope so, I said. The extended family did what extended families do, split into teams. One aunt sent me a long message about forgiveness. Another quietly mailed me a check for $200 with a note that read, for the principle of the thing. Grandma sent a card that said simply, you did what I wish I'd done when I was your age. And Evan, he stayed. Through every document, every court notice, every phone call from my mother that started with tears and ended with guilt, he stayed. When Marissa, his ex, tried reaching out again to catch up, he didn't hide it. He showed me the message, then deleted it without opening it. I don't need unfinished stories anymore, he said. I'd rather build something that doesn't have to collapse to prove it's real. We spent that night painting over the last scuffs on my wall. He didn't need to say it, but I knew. We were both tired of inheriting other people's chaos. By the time summer crept in, my apartment had become mine again. Not just legally, but emotionally. I rearranged the furniture, donated half of what I owned, replaced the sheets, and changed the locks a final time. Not out of paranoia. Out of peace. Some mornings I'd catch myself listening for the sound of kids' laughter, or Alyssa's voice drifting down the hall. Habit, not longing. The silence felt heavy at first. Then it became clarity. One evening, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine. The city lights smudged like watercolor. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. It was Alyssa. Her voice was thin, brittle around the edges. You ruined my life, she said. You took my kids away. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I just said, I hope you find help, Alyssa, and ended the call. I blocked the number afterward, not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood that some boundaries don't close doors. They build walls that keep you safe. A week later, Mom texted, Dinner Sunday? Just us. No tension. I stared at the message for a while. I typed back, okay, but let's meet at a restaurant. Baby steps. When Sunday came, she hugged me a little too tightly. Dad was quieter than usual. For once, no one mentioned Alyssa. We talked about work, about Grandma's garden, about Evan. Normal things. The kind of small peace you stop expecting after years of chaos. When I got home that night, the apartment was dark, calm, still. I turned on a single lamp and sat on the couch. The folder labeled Evidence was still in my desk drawer. I almost threw it out, but then I smiled and slid it into a new one, labeled Boundaries. It wasn't proof anymore, it was reminder. I've learned that love without limits isn't love at all. It's surrender. That family loyalty doesn't mean silence. And that sometimes being the bad guy is just what happens when you finally tell the truth. I stood in my quiet living room, the walls freshly painted, the air light again. The baseball was gone. The couch was different. But the peace was priceless. I locked the door behind me, felt the click echo through the room, and thought, this time I gave the key only to myself.